Malignant is a 2021 horror film directed by James Wan. Man, that feels nice to say. If you didn't know, of course, James Wan is a pretty popular and famous modern horror director who is known for such hits as Saw, Insidious, The Conjuring, and Dead Silence. But he's also dabbled in the big Hollywood blockbuster scene with movies like the later Fast and Furious movies and Aquaman. But James Wan has returned to his horror roots in Malignant, which follows a woman with a mysterious past and these episodes that are basically, I guess it is akin to paralysis, where she is witnessing murders and she can't do anything about it. Her sister and the police are using these episodes to track down a killer who has been terrorizing this woman and the people in her life. So, before I get to anything, can we just appreciate the poster for Malignant real quick? I mean, this thing is a beauty. I love really cool poster designs, and we don't see them a lot anymore, and Malignance was just so fantastic, I had to point it out. Now, if the poster lends its hand towards the tone and the theming of this movie, perhaps this review will help out a tad in helping you get the right frame of mind for this film. Because I'm sure you're going to see a lot of polarizing opinions about this movie. Even I myself have some back and forth in my mind after just having seen Malignant about how I really feel about the movie. But let me just say, I enjoyed the movie overall. I do recommend it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie of the year, but I do think it's a really good James Wan horror flick, and I think it's one that will please a lot of fans, especially of 80s and 90s horror like myself. This movie has a lot of homage in it, mostly to some very cheesy 80s films, but also some of the tone does feel like a 90s movie. One of the strongest parts of Malignant is its imagery. James Wan and the director of photography, how they craft the camera angles and the lighting and the movement is really creative, and it feels like James Wan has gotten like a narrower focus with different movies, like how he went from being pretty free with like Saw, Dead Silence, then with the Conjuring movies had a specific style he had to match, and then with Fast and Furious and Aquaman he had to kind of get regulated. And so in Malignant, this being his kind of freebie project, he just went balls to the wall essentially with the camera movement and the angles and just getting weird with it. And if there's any word I can use to describe Malignant, it is wacky. Wacky, not only in the camera movement, but in the third act, it just gets straight up wacky. And if you aren't expecting it, it might be a little too jarring for you and you may not enjoy yourself. But if you're like me and you like to see the bizarre, then I think you will appreciate Malignant for what it is. Now, to me, the downside is that you have to get through Acts 1 and 2 to get to the bizarre Act 3. I feel like most people are either going to like the first two acts and not the third, or flipped, and in my case it's the flipped. Now those first two acts of the movie, where things are getting established and you're meeting the characters and you go through this kind of a mystery essentially, is not bad by any means, but I think with a veteran director like James Wan, I expected some different pacing in it, I guess. Some parts felt very slow, and therefore it kind of got stale and dragged itself a bit, and I feel like that could have been resolved really easily with a different pacing in those first two acts. But regardless, looking at the movie for what it is, it sets up the characters very quickly, you get immersed in the world, you get to learn what's kind of going down. From the very opening scene, you can actually very quickly tell that this isn't like a typical Wan film, and he said this is the antithesis of all of his other movies. So don't go into this expecting The Conjuring. While it does look like The Conjuring on the outset, it's pretty far from it. It's not the typical paranormal movie that you'd expect with him. And I do actually enjoy it for those purposes. With that being said, though, I do think there are some rushed moments, especially the very last scene, where it tries to wrap everything up in one fell swoop, and it doesn't quite meet its mark. Some of the lines are kind of cheesy and forced, and a lot of this movie feels like it's just trying to get to the end. And I like a movie that can sit in one moment and enjoy itself in that moment. And that's not to say the premise is terrible, because I think the creativity of the twist was very impressive. But to have a very skilled person behind the dialogue and the setup would make it more appealing. Someone like Leigh Whannell, who's worked with James Wan in the past, can really flesh out those scenes better. I'm also just a big Leigh Whannell fan, if you couldn't tell from other reviews that I've done in the past. But with that being said, I do think Malignant stands on its own in James Wan's resume. Some people are going to say it's his worst film. I think it's one of his most intriguing. I don't know what the ranking for me would be. I'd have to sit down and think about it, to be completely honest with you. But I'm beating around the bush here to not spoil anything, because I went into this movie with, like, no expectations other than the fact that it was a James Wan horror film. So I'm going to leave you with that same benefit. I'm going to give it a ranking in a moment, and then if you want to hear the spoilers, which I highly recommend you watch the movie first, I will tell you the ending and why I appreciated it. But Malignant, very stylistic, very weird, and for the right fan with the right mindset, I think you will enjoy yourself watching this movie. With that said, I'm going to give Malignant a 3.5 out of 5. Let me know what you thought of Malignant in the comments below, and now, let's get to the spoilers. So in the first two acts of Malignant, you have this setup with this woman who you can tell pretty quickly was adopted from a young age and was a part of this underground experiment, like, it felt very like Stranger Things-esque, kind of 80s throwback vibe, especially with some of the lighting choices that they used and kind of the dramatic pans, which I loved all of that stuff, actually. I think it was really different, and we don't see that a lot today, so I really enjoyed it. And I knew that that kind of tone was going to come back later. And then it goes into this kind of dramatic, similar to The Conjuring, of like, you know, you have some jump scare elements. There's like the lights out kind of trope with like the lights flickering and the shadow person is there, and it's Gabriel, the devil. And I'm like, where is this all going? Is this going to be like a typical, like, oh, there's a creepy ghost guy? And then there is a VHS footage from the hospital, and it shows the girl, and it pans over, and there is this like Siamese twin growing out of the back of her head. And I'm like, okay, you got me hooked now. What's gonna happen? And it literally turns into a remake of Basket Case mixed with Dead Alive, mixed with Poltergeist, mixed with Stranger Things. So the thing about Homage is that either it sticks its landing or it doesn't. And to me, it stuck the landing at the end, which I'm sure it's not going to be for everybody. Some people are going to call this, I've seen reviews calling it the cancer on James Wan's resume, and I guess I can understand where they're coming from, because it's so different from any of his other works, but I respect it for being so bold and just balls to the wall, just going with this wacky premise, which feels like it's ripped out of an 80s movie. So if you haven't seen Basket Case or Dead Alive or some of those other movies, you don't know what I'm talking about. Basically the ending is that there is a Siamese twin on the back of our protagonist's head who was surgically removed, but the brain was left inside, so it takes over her body and like reverses it and kills the people responsible for causing it and its sister trauma when they were kids that she has suppressed. And that is the malignant monster that has been terrorizing this entire movie. It's been her the entire time. And I was expecting some sort of twist that you kind of get when you see some of James Wan's movies. But I'm like, I don't know how far the twist is going to go. Is it going to be that she's doing it? Is it going to be that there was, like, they were related, like it was her brother or like her dad or something? And then it's this Siamese twin thing, and when her head opens up and the little face comes out, I'm like, okay, alright, I enjoy this. And then it just goes nuts and literally kills the entire police precinct. Now, I will say it's very over the top. There's no doubt about that. And some of it doesn't quite make sense. For example, I can suspend my disbelief and say, yeah, okay, it does all these flips. Maybe it unlocks parts of her brain and it knows what to do. But how does it control the technology? How does it control the phone and the TV? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, the phone, like, statics, and it bugged me in the movie because I'm like, phones don't static, they're not analog. But I'm like, alright, I'm gonna look past it. I'm just gonna suspend my disbelief. Some of the lines were cheesy, like the ending one where it's like, I didn't have a blood relative, but we are blood now, or something. I'm like, it's right before me this entire time. I'm like, okay, really cheese. But you know what? I'm gonna look past it because I enjoyed the movie. I gotta say I enjoyed it. It wasn't, like I said, the best, but I had fun with it. And I think what I appreciated is the boldness, just sticking to it. Like, yeah, her head's gonna open up and there's a face in it. Like, what? Like, dead alive. And then you have the whole Siamese twin thing where it's like literally arms on the back of her neck, straight out of Basket Case. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, he really went this far. James Wan really went this crazy. I have to respect it. Because I was scared that the ending was gonna be, in the next room over is her, like, creepy brother, and he's got his hair down like Samara from The Ring, and he just is killing people, and at the end they're gonna have, like, a priest or something. He's like, go away, and goes into hell. I'm like, it would have been just La Llorona and The Conjuring and The Nun all over again. And so when the thing comes out of the head, I'm like, this is actually different. I like that they tried something new. I have to give it props for that. The first two acts, I think, were trying to get there, and I feel like it should have introduced that element faster and had her, like, talking to it or something, where it was gonna frame. It's like, this is just me spitballing out loud here because I like to think of these ideas, but what if the brother Gabriel is like, if you try to rat me out, you'll look crazy and you'll be arrested, or who would believe that I exist, or something like that. Something where it creates some kind of dilemma for the main character, because she felt more like a spectator, and at the very end they're like, you know what killed your baby? And then she's just like, I have the power now. Came out of left field. If it would have led that up better, it would have been a better payoff. Again, it's cheese. I'm fine with it. But if it really wanted to stick the landing better, those are the things I would have personally liked to see to elevate that experience. But with that being said, Malignant was a great time. I really enjoyed it. I really loved the camera movement. It's excellently done in terms of, from the filmmaking perspective. From the story, it's wacky, but I liked it. I liked the weird, and I appreciated it. Thank you, James Wan. And I hope to see more of his movies, because whether you like it or don't, you have to respect his passion. You can tell he had a lot of fun making this. Him and Lee Winnell, they were film students, they wanted to make films, and to see them actually doing it and going to the movie theater again, like, and re-experiencing it, seeing people coming back after, you know, the shutdowns and everything, it's really nice to see, especially for the spookiest time of year. Thank you for watching, and remember, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.